Okay, hello and welcome. In this tutorial we're going to look at using images for sprites. So instead of just having solid color sprites, having images, loading them and then scaling them to use them in our game. Okay, so for this tutorial you will need a template code which I've given you. You can start off with template code that looks like especially what we have done in the previous lessons, and your template code should be a basic room with a sprite you can move and you can go between the rooms. This is what we've been working on in the previous videos. Okay, so I'm giving you this code to start with. However, what we're going to do with it is we're going to change it. So instead of a square of color, we're going to change it so we have a sprite in the room, an image that you can move. And also look, if I click the other direction, the sprite changes depending on the direction. And you can also see I've got an image loaded into the background there. So we're looking at using images, loading them in and replacing our plain blocks with sprite images instead. Okay, so to start with, make sure you've got the template code I've given you. Now, this template code is the same as we've had before. You've got some basic colors. We've got our player class here. The only slight change you'll notice is there is a global attribute set here for the width and the height. There's a reason for that later on. And all the rest is the same though. Setting up our player with a white sprite for the player. We've got our methods for moving the player like we had in the previous video. We've got our walls being created here and our rooms. So this is all the same code we've had from the previous lessons. Our rooms being generated and obviously our events for movement within the rooms. Okay, so this is exactly what we've had before. Okay, and again it should just look something like that. Okay, with the player moving around. Okay, so what do we need to do? The very first thing we need to do is to set up our sprite image for our player. So I want you to go and find the player class, the class that we created last time for the player. We are going to make a new variable here, a new attribute, sorry, for the player image. So I'm going to create sprite attribute. Sorry, I lost words. I'm just going to call it player img. And I'm going to set it to none, none because we haven't actually put anything in it yet. We're just creating an attribute that we can access within this player class. Okay, so just underneath the player, outside of the constructor, here we put it, so it can be accessed by all the methods. Okay, let's go down to the constructor class, the init method here. Okay, this is where our sprite player has been created. So the first thing we need to do, at the moment, look, you can see it's being set to white. Okay, well, we don't want it to be white, we want to replace that with an image. So I'm actually going to comment out that fill white. Comment it out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to load an image. Now for this activity, you need the template code, but you also need to download 3 images. 3 images that I've provided for you. We've got boy R, boy L, and background, and they're all PNGs. Okay, so those 3 images need to be saved in the same folder as the template code I've given you. The same folder. Okay, make sure they're in the same folder. Okay, first thing we're going to do, we're going to load the player image. How do we do that? I'm going to go self.player_img. So what I'm doing is I'm saying access the player img attribute up here, and self because it's within this class. And I'm going to say pygame.image.load, and I'm going to tell it what image to load. boyr.png, boy facing right.png, .convert _alpha bracket. So this is basically loading the image and converting it to a format that can use. Don't worry about the alpha to move it, just put it at the end so it makes it usable. Okay, we can look at that later on. And I'm loading the right version image to start with. So that's loading the image and it's saving it in our player attribute so we can use it within this. Okay, what's next? Well, we've loaded the image, but we haven't actually done anything with it yet. So what we're going to do down here, we've got self.getRect, all the stuff we set up before. I'm going to add in here. We're now going to set the image to the surface we've created. We've created a surface here for an image object. We're now going to set the image we just loaded to it. So self.image equals self.player.img. So we're saying the image for our player is being set to the player image we've just loaded. Okay, we've loaded the image, now we're setting it to it. Okay, let's see what happens now. Make sure, again, this is saved in the same folder. If you have put it in a subfolder, you'd have to put the subfolder here first. But because we've got it in the same folder, it should work. Let's play this. And there we go. Simple as that. We've got our player image being loaded, and look, I can move them around. However, you will see there's a problem. Okay, because our sprite is massive at the moment. It is massive. So we do have an image with this. We have a problem with this. So what we need to do is we need to go back and we need to set our the size of it to the size of the surface that we are using, the location. So down here, I'm going to just put this in here. I'm going to put a comment in here, set image to surface size. Oops, size. How do we do that? Okay, well we go, one second, we go self.image equals pygame.transform.scale. So we're saying we're using the pygame function, transform and scale to resize it. And we're going to say self.player._img. That's our image that we're going to use. And we're going to resize that self player image to the size of the surface. Now, if you look up here, we've actually got a width and a height attribute that we can use, which is the size of our surface in this for the sprite. So I'm going to go self.width, comma self.height. Now notice here there is an open bracket here, then there's another open and closed brackets with the height and the width there, and another closed brackets to the end. That's quite important, okay? So there's two sets of brackets here being used. Now we've done that, we don't actually need this second one here, the self image here, because this is already setting our player image. We don't need to then set it again. Okay, so if we run it now, let's see what happens. Okay, it's worked. Look at our little dude there. Now, one little problem, our guy is absolutely tiny. Okay, he's gone from being massive to tiny. Why is that? Because the original surface we set for this sprite was 15 by 15, okay, which makes him tiny. So I'm actually going to increment that. I'm going up to 32 by 32. Okay, so I'm increase the size of our surface and now our sprite image to 32 by 32. Now let's run it again. And yeah, much better now. Okay, he still should just about, oh no, he doesn't fit through there, my mistake. Okay, so it might be that you need to resize him again. Let's try 30. Let's bring him down, so double the size. I'm thinking in binary. There we go, 30. He just goes through. Look at that, perfect fit. Okay, so you can resize your sprite within the room, but obviously you might need to change the size depending on what you want to fit in through with gaps and things. So there we have an image in the game, resized to scale using the width and the height. And that's essentially how we use images. However, you'll notice at the moment our sprite only looks one way. So move to the right, that's fine. But if I go left, he's sliding backwards. Okay, so we want him to, he can go both ways. So what do we need to do that? Well, there are several ways we could do this. I'm going to show you one way, but there are other ways you can do with flipping images and things. But for simplicity in this one, I'm going to have a second image. So at the top here where I've got player img, I'm going to put player img2. I'm going to have a second image. The reason for that is because I want to show you could have different images for different locations. If he's if he got hurt, for example, or if he wanted to change his costume and things like that, okay? So that's the reason why I'm doing it this way. So I've added a second attribute there for player image 2. What we're going to do now is also going to load that second image. So where I've loaded this first image, I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it just underneath. But this time I'm going to say player image 2, very important, equals boy left. So I've got the right image saved in player image and I've got the left image saved in player image 2. So we've got two images that we can now use. Okay, so that's fine. We've loaded the images, but nothing's going to happen at the moment because we're not changing them. So how are we going to do that? Again, there are different ways we could do this. I am going to actually create a new little method within this player class to change the images over. Okay, so we've got our constructor class, we've got change speed, we've got update. Just underneath that here, I'm going to make sure I'm in line. Make sure this is in line with all the previous ones, otherwise you're going to have problems in your class. So I've just copied this paste to make sure it's exactly the same. I'm going to go def face r, so face right, and self. Okay, so I'm creating a method to make him face right. Then I'm going to do exactly the same thing, def face L. So we've got one method to face left and one method to face right. Guess what? All we got to do is take the piece of code from up here, the one that says transform, self.image transform here. I'm going to copy all that line. And when we run the face right method, I'm going to paste that one in. So that one's going to be facing right, the original IMG. But when he goes the left method, whoop, if I can find that online, we're going to change that to player image 2. So face right is self image on its own, player image, and self face left is image 2. So all it's going to do is when we call one, it will change it to one image, and when we call the other one, it's going to change to the other image. Now we've got the two methods there inside our player class, but at the moment, unfortunately, nothing actually happens because we haven't called those methods yet. So the final thing we need to do now is to actually go and call those methods. Well, when do we need to call them? We need to call them when the buttons are pressed down at the bottom. So we're going to write down to our main loop down here. And look, we've got a key event for right and we've got a key event for left. Just doing that for clarity. So when you press the right key, we're going to run the player dot face r face right method. And guess what? When you press the left key, we're going to run the player dot face left method. So face right, face left when the left or right or left key are pressed. And with any luck, unless I've made a mistake, pressing right will make him go right, and left makes him left. Right, left. Very subtle little movement, but it changes so he faces the right direction at least, which is nice. And that is the essence of using sprites. You could have another method that changes, so when he hits a wall, he changes color, or when he picks up an item, he changes skin color, or like, you know, to a different super powered one or something like that. There's lots of different things you could do. Okay, that is using it for a sprite. However, there is something else we could change in this room as well to make it more interesting, and that is the background color. So how can we do that? Well, believe it or not, it's pretty similar to the sprite we've just done. Okay, instead of loading an image and putting it on the sprite, we're going to load an image and put it on the background surface. Okay, so just to remind you, in the folder you should have your two sprites which I've given you, but I've also given you a background.png as well. Okay, a background image. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our just before our main loop here, just before our main loop, and I'm going to load the background image. So background underscore img background image equals pygame.image.load, just like we did before, and it's called background background.png, background.png. Okay, and just like we did before as well, convert underscore to alpha. Bracket. So that's going to load our background image from the file and save it in this variable. Just like we did before, we need to resize. Well, just to see if we can actually put it on the background first. So background image, just from this. So I just had to check something there. So what we're going to do, after we've loaded the image, we're going to go down into the loop, and you'll notice somewhere in our loop we've got screen.fill. So at the moment our background screen is being filled with a black color. We don't want that anymore, so I'm going to go comment out. Okay, and what we're going to do instead is we are going to draw the picture to the background. So screen, which is our background surface, blit, which is for drawing, and our background underscore img. So I am drawing our background image to the screen. And we do need to give it the coordinates of where we want to draw it. So I'm going to put in brackets here 0, 0, because I want to draw it from the top left corner of the screen. So you could move the background around. So I'm drawing the background image onto the screen, starting at coordinates 0, 0. Okay, let's see what happens now. So my background image has been drawn on there, which is good. But you'll notice at the moment it's not taking up the whole screen, and that is because this image is actually slightly too small. Okay, the image doesn't fit in the room. So what we're going to do, just like we did with the sprite, resizing the sprite, scaling the sprite, we're going to scale the background image. Okay, so we're going to go back to our code. We've drawn it now to the room here. We're going to go back up to where we loaded the background image up here, and just like we did before, we are going to scale it. And how do we do that? We do background underscore img equals pygame dot transform dot scale, just like we did before. The background img. I'm going to go screen width, screen height, like that. So what am I doing? I'm saying I'm going to scale, I need two brackets at the end, just be careful there, two brackets at the end. I'm going to scale this background image, transform it to the screen width and screen height. Now these are two constants that were created way up the top in our code. So we've already got them in use up here somewhere, screen height and screen width. So we're using the screen height and screen width to set the size of our background image. Okay, so I've set the size of our background image, and then it's being blitted to the screen in our main loop there. So, sorry, moving around a lot. Let's see if this works. You can see there the size of the image has been stretched out, so it's been rescaled or scaled so it fits the window. Okay, and if I change the size of the window, that would now resize and automatically redo as well, because I've set it to whatever the screen height and width is. So there you have it. We have learned how to use a sprite image, load it in, to scale it, to change the image using keys, and also to put an image in the background as well. In the next lesson, we'll look at using images for buttons and menus in a game. Good luck, and see you in lesson soon.